think we're just going to give it another minute here as I get set up. Hey, hi, everyone. Welcome to Fundraising Essentials with Disability Victory and ActBlue. My name is Sarah Blahovic, and my pronouns are she and her. I am a white woman with brown hair. I'm wearing glasses and a pink shirt. My background is blurry. Before we get started, we have a few accessibility and housekeeping notes. Today's event has live captioning and ASL interpretation. To view the captioning, click Show Captions icon along the menu ribbon. You can also view the captions in stream text. We will place the stream text link in the chat, and I will do that right now. We also have ASL interpretation that will be on screen. So you will be able to see that, especially if you are in side-by-side mode on your screen. If you need accessibility, help with accessibility during this event, please message myself or Neil for help. I'll give Neil a second to introduce himself as well as our co-founder.
You may need to pin me. There we go. Hello, everyone. My name is Neil Carter. I'm the co-founder of Disability Victory. I'm a Black man in a white shirt, sitting in a predominantly white room in a black chair. And my pronouns are he, him, his.
So throughout this workshop, you will have opportunities to ask questions and respond to questions from our trainers. You may submit questions and comments using the chat. If you're on the phone, which I don't believe anyone is at this point, and you want to ask a question or make a comment, you can raise your hand. Neil and I will be monitoring the chat and will voice any questions and comments that come through for accessibility. You can also email questions and comments to hello@disabilityvictory.org. By default, you can only chat with the hosts and panelists for this event. We do this so that we can voice all messages, and also because it can be distracting for people using assistive technology. We are recording today's session, and we'll inform you once that recording is available. So for those who are new to Disability Victory, a little bit about us. Disability Victory is a 501c4 organization. Our mission is to build the political power of disabled progressives through training, networking, and leadership development. We envision a country where disabled people have all of the information, support, and skills they need to successfully lead as candidates, elected officials, and campaign staff. Learn more and make sure you sign up for our mailing list for updates at disabilityvictory.org. Today's training is also sponsored by ActBlue. As a nonprofit, ActBlue is driven by the belief that democracy works better when more people participate in civic life and when our campaigns and nonprofits are powered by the people they serve. That's why they've built a powerful online fundraising platform for Democratic candidates up and down the ballot, progressive organizations, and nonprofits. ActBlue's tools make it possible for anyone to build a grassroots campaign or movement and give donors an easy and secure way to support their favorite candidates and causes. And with that, we're going to go on to the first part of our training. We will be actually hearing from ActBlue a little bit later in the training, but we will be moving on to our first presenter today, Kristin Broner of the Broner firm. Bring her on screen. Spotlight, there we go. Okay. Ms. Broner has engaged in high-level politics her entire career. After graduating from Florida A&M University, she began working to strengthen the Florida Democratic Party. From there, Ms. Broner worked as a major donor fundraiser for a premier trial lawyer association in Florida before leaving for Washington, D.C. In D.C., Ms. Broner refined her skills and expanded her networking and fundraising base while playing an integral role at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, Her standout role led her to become the Southern Finance Director for a U.S. Senator's presidential bid. Most recently, she served as the out-of-state finance director for the Abrams for Governor campaign. And I will pass it over to her. Her slides up on screen. Hold on.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you to Disability Victory. Sarah Neal, it's been a pleasure. And then, of course, I want to give a special shout out to New Disabled South Rising, my friends there, for connecting us. I'm really grateful to be here. My name is Kristin Broner. I use she, her pronouns. I am a Black woman with pink glasses and long twisty hair and a purple shirt, sitting in a room, and my background is blurry. With that, today I'm just going to give you an overview of finance for those who are interested in running for office, or for those who are interested in just working on a campaign or having more information about it. So with that, I will dive right in. So let's talk finance. It's the first slide. It has Stacey Abrams, President Joe Biden, and Vice President Kamala Harris on there. I do want to take a moment and just, acknowledge the profound moment that we are all sitting in from a historical standpoint, that a woman of color, a Black woman, South Asian woman, is, in my hope and prayer, going to be the nominee for the Democratic ticket to be our next president, because we are all going to do our best to whoop some Republican MAGA behind. And so with that, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge this moment we are in. I am currently wearing a purple Stacey Abrams shirt. It was an honor to work for her. And I think it is time that women lead our country. I think it is disappointing that, she's having to take over in such dire straits, but good dire political strengths. I think our country is headed in a good direction in our current president. But I say all of that to say, what a moment to be alive. Unfortunately, I would like to stop living through so many world life events. I feel like since Rodney King and 9/11, it has not stopped, but eventually we'll stop living through so many events. Let's talk finance. If you'll go to the next slide. You already heard about me. Don't need to go into details. On the screen is my picture, black and white, nothing there. We can skip that. So let's jump right in. Today, you will learn, the basics of finance. So what is finance? You will learn how to get started, whether you're a candidate or someone looking to work on a campaign. You learn about the Rolodex, the overall process of fundraising and systems. We will talk about how to build goals for fundraising. And of course, the number one thing that we must all know how to do is the hard ask. Next slide, please. And this overall presentation is a mixture of colors, yellow and pink. So like an ombre. So finance department or finance overview. The first thing I like to say when talking about fundraising is not some cute little fundraiser shows up at your door for your campaign with 10 checks of $500 million a piece and you have magically hit your goals. It's not some digital fundraiser showing up and they have all the secrets to go viral and they just do it. And I see the question, but I am going to leave that there for either Sarah and Neil. There's a question in the chat. That is not what fundraising is. Fundraising is systems. Fundraising is process. Fundraising is structure. It's not just this willy-nilly thing that happens just because we think we should run for office or because we're on a campaign. I say that because I think it's so important, because I get calls so many times from candidates or people looking to run. Like, I need a fundraiser. I'm looking to raise, $10 million. And the seat that they're running in has never even raised $2 million, let alone 10 million. And it's not to say that these things are impossible, but it is to say that there's an art and science to doing fundraising. Next slide. So we are going to do some finance department overview and just some general roles, because I think it's important when we talk about, before we dive into like systems and how to and what next and strategy and things of that nature, let's just get an understanding of, of who's in a finance department. So first, you have a finance director or your veteran consultant. These are the people who are most responsible for your finance plan, for creating the strategy and the systems for you to be able to successfully raise the funds you need to win your campaign or run your organization. These are the leaders. So think department head. Up under them would be your deputy finance director, and again, consultants, because consultants can fall anywhere on this ladder, right? Depending on what you need and how professional you need the skill set to be. Your deputy finance director tends to take a more micro level instead of a macro level look at your fundraising structure and strategy. So if you have a finance director on a presidential race, they would be over the overall fundraising for Kamala Harris. But then you would have deputy finance directors that may do regional work, that may focus on digital fundraising, that may focus on high dollars, some may focus on grassroots. And so they take a more micro level approach in order for all of these different tiers and systems to flow into your overall finance strategy. Think of it that way. So you have someone that's at the top of the department, the finance director, macro level view. How do we get to raise $100 million? How do we get to raising $500 million? And here are these different buckets. And within those different buckets, you would have deputy finance directors, and they would own various pieces of this structure, of this finance plan. Then you have a finance coordinator. Just what it sounds like. Someone who's coordinating various projects, right? They could work alongside a deputy finance director, or they could be someone who just focus on events. They could be someone who just focus on, data management, system management. You have a call time manager. Call time is when you sit down and you just call folks and you ask them for money. Well, in order for you to call somebody, someone has to pull a list. Someone has to put it into a system. Someone has to have this information for you to do this, right? If you're the candidate. And so that person manages that overall process of calling donors, who you're calling, how much are they giving? What type of donors are these? Are these people who fall in the J Street world, or are these people that fall in the APAC world? Does it matter? And so that's typically who your call time manager is. Then you have a finance assistant. Just what it sounds like. Their whole job is to assist all of the folks on the team on various projects, whether it's event-based, whether it's call time based, whether it's briefing and meetings, or whether it's just doing what we like to call the grunt work, unfortunately, right? But no one is above doing the grunt work. Anybody on the chain of command can do grunt work. And then you have your finance interns. You typically give them data management work or data processing work. So you just came back from a fundraiser and you need to input 10 checks. All the checks are $1,000 a piece. You need to create new records. This is who would typically do that. So that's your finance department. And I think it's important for people to know that, because I think sometimes they have I think they have views of what a finance department looks like and who these fundraisers are. And so if you're working on a presidential campaign, if you're working on a gubernatorial campaign, if you're working on a US Senate race, sometimes, like even in my state Senate race, because our state Senate races raise between $2 to $10 million here in my home state of Florida because of our media markets, right? So you would typically have a full team, a full robust team. But if you're working on a smaller campaign, say you're working to be the next county commissioner, you're working to be the next soil and water commissioner, you may only have a finance director, or you may only have a call time manager, right? It all depends on, what office you're running for and what that campaign calls for. So if you're running a race that's raising 10, 15, $30 million, you should have all of these people, right? But if you're running a race that's only raising about $25,000, you probably have an intern or an assistant, and that is okay. You want to hire for the campaign that you are running and not try to have all these ambitious goals that don't fit your needs. Any questions there? And feel free to drop questions in the chat too. And I'm very interactive, so send questions to myself, or excuse me, let me follow the rules here. Please make sure to send any questions to myself or Neil, and that was from Sarah, so I'll keep moving. Next slide. So we're talking about finance overall. We have the finance department. We have people who run the fundraising structure. We have an idea of what they do on a day-to-day basis or what their overall job is. So you have the finance team. The next part of this that you have, next slide, is the candidate. And on this slide, we have former U.S. Senator Carol Braun Mosley, and she's waving. She's a Black woman. If I'm not mistaken, she was the first Black woman to be U.S. Senator. And it says, magic, there's a quote, it reads, magic lies in challenging what seems impossible, right? And so we are seeing that today play out with Kamala Harris, VP Kamala Harris, and we're seeing that play out, you know, across the board with various candidates who are getting elected to office. But the number one role of a candidate is to do call time and raise money in terms of fundraising. That's it. Your job isn't to input checks. Again, unless you're working on a smaller race, then yeah, you probably need to input the checks. But if you're running for state house, state senate, you're running to be mayor, and it's, you know, not a small town, it's a mid-sized city or a large city. Your job is to sit and do call time, to make connections, to make the donors feel good, and raise the money. That's really it. A lot of the times you meet candidates and they feel that they need to design the fundraising program and the fundraising structure. And it's like, no, that's why you hired professionals, right? And I think it's important to say, because I see this all the time. I have young fundraisers come to me, you know, asking me, what do I do? They're arguing with me about the money. They're arguing with me about how much we should or should not be raising. They're arguing with me about what I think the process is. Yes, you should very much be a partner with your fundraising team, no matter the size of your campaign. But your job is to make the hard ask. And we'll get into what that is a little bit later. That is the candidate's job as it relates to fundraising. Sarah, I see you came on.
Yeah. So first thing, I just wanted to take a quick access break because our second interpreter has joined. So I want to make sure that the interpreters can quickly work out how they're going to, you know, shift back and forth.
Absolutely.
And we do have a question in the chat. From Lydia, my goal is to raise $200,000 over the course of the campaign. How should I plan on staffing?
So if your goal is $200,000, then I think the first thing, and we'll get into this, first thing first, you need a budget, right? And I didn't talk about that because this is more so fundraising based, but you need a budget, right? 60% of your money should go to direct voter contact, right? So whether that's mailers, whether that's being up on TV, whether that's radio ads, whether that's whatever, it needs to be direct voter contact, right? Knocking on doors, having house parties. The bulk of your budget should not be fancy events, right? So if you're raising $200,000, first things first, your overhead should not be that high, right? And when I say overhead, I'm talking about who you hire, and you know how you spend that money, right? And so that's important because so often people are like, oh, I need to go out and buy t-shirts, right? Or I need to go out and buy whatever they think that they need to buy. And it's not the case, right? It's not the case at all. So that's number one. Number two is, once you figured out your budget and you know that 60 really to 75% of your money is spent on direct voter contact, that leaves about, 30% and below to spend on overhead, to spend on things that you need. And so how many months is the campaign, right? If the campaign is 4 months and you need to spend raise and spend $200,000 in 4 months, then you're only hiring somebody for about 5 months, right? Because you have before the launch of your campaign and after the launch of your campaign. That's how you should always think of hiring, right? So especially when it comes to your campaign manager or your finance director. So that's number two. For a $200,000 race, you can hire a finance director for about 4 or 5 months and pay them a pretty reasonable or decent salary, right? And especially someone who's young in their career. And so I know this is a sticking point because it depends on where you live, where you're from. Like in Florida, expecting someone to work full time, you know, on $3,000 a month is kind of tough, or $5,000 a month, or however much you're paying them, right? But if you are in Oklahoma somewhere where it may be a little bit cheaper, or Mississippi, then it may, you know, you may be able to live out the values that I have, which is to pay folks a living wage, right? So that's also something you need to contend with. So I hope that answers your question. Number one, you know, your budget, and in your budget, how much you're spending on direct voter contact. And then number two, then you move into how much do you have to hire people? Because you're gonna have to hire a campaign manager, finance director, probably someone to knock doors, probably gonna have to hire, you know, a little assistant to just run and do odds and ends jobs, right? Whatever they may be, run to the post office, go drop this check off, go, you know, whatever, right? And so whomever is on your team, and I don't know your race, I don't know much about you, I don't know any of the background, but these are the basics. The basics is 60% direct plus direct voter contact. The rest of your money is overhead. And within that overhead, whom are you hiring? Are you hiring a campaign manager? Are you hiring a political director? Are you hiring a finance director? Are you hiring, how much are you paying them? Those things. Are they full-time staff? Do they have benefits? So those things kind of come into play. Are you the nominee, right? Or have you already made it past the primary and now you're in the general, and maybe you can ask your state party for assistance? I don't know. Those things come into play. But I hope generally I have answered your question, that if you're raising $200,000, it needs to be decided how many months is that $200,000 over, and how much of that is going on direct voter contact, and then what's remaining goes into your overhead costs and how you figure out your team overall. All righty. With that, I don't think I hear any more questions. So yes, your job as a candidate is to have these conversations on the front end. So let's take a step back again. This is Kristin giving you advice in general, not just finance, because this slide is about your job as a candidate in terms of finance. Your job overall in terms as a candidate is to be on one accord with whomever you put as your campaign manager. That way, when you have initial conversations about what you want your race to look like, it includes how much you're spending in terms of your budget on personnel, right, on human resources. And it includes how much you're spending on direct voter contact. So that's separate and apart from your role as a candidate as it relates to finance. That's in your role as it relates to as a candidate overall. And I do want to make that distinction. Thank you.
This is Sarah. Next slide.
Yes. Okay. Then you have finance volunteers. You know, on this slide is generic stock photos of white men working on their computers. You have the finance committee, finance bundlers, and finance call-time helpers. Your finance committee is essentially a group of people who've agreed to help you figure out how to raise this money. You typically find this for campaigns that's raising north of $250,000 or $500,000. But any campaign can have it, right? Because if you have people that want to help you figure out how to raise this $200,000 that we just talked about, and it's a group of them and they have deep networks and they want to help your team, their whole job is they're not getting paid. They're just being nice to the campaign and making introductions for you, connecting you with potential donors, connecting you with potential folks that can be of assistance to your campaign. Finance bundlers are very simple, but they are less involved in your campaign as a finance committee. They're more just people who are like, look, I love you. I want you to win. I know about 10 people. I'm going to ask them to give you $1,000 a piece. That way you can have $10,000. And they just bundle you money. And then finance call time helpers are folks who are just like, I always like to say, the sweet seasoned ladies who are like 70 years old and they come sit in a campaign office and they just make calls and ask people for $5 and $100 and they tell people about events. Now, that's typically my experience. Don't want to say that it's only, you know, for the sweet seasoned ladies, but it could be anyone that's just willing to come and, you know, you guys have big major grassroots fundraiser coming up and you need to call at least 500 people. These are people who just sit in the office and call people and ask them for $50, ask them for $25, ask them for $2, whatever that they can give. And then they show up at events and they do check-in. They, help with events. They help with whatever you need. So they're finance call time helpers or overall finance volunteers. Next slide. One of the things that we need to talk about is where your money comes from, the types of dollars that you can raise. On this slide, again, ombre colored, you have a logo for the collective PAC. You have a picture of 3 white men who are major donors in the Democratic Party, and then you have a logo for Rolodexing Action Fund. So the types of money that you can typically accept, and again, each state is different, each race is different. Some states have campaign finance reform, some local cities have different types of ordinances in place. So you would need to be aware of that as it relates to you. But if you're running for federal office, we'll use that example, or even state office in Georgia or Florida, you can take contributions from PACs. And the example PAC that I have on here is the Collective PAC, or the CBC PAC, Congressional Black Caucus PAC, or, a labor PAC. So PACs have vested interest in giving money to candidates who are in alignment with their beliefs, right? I used to work for the Florida trial lawyers. We believe in consumer protections. We believe that, if someone hits you on the interstate and their insurance decides not to pay and you have a broken arm and you have a serious injury, we're going to go after that insurance company, because your whole job as an insurance company is to protect both the person driving the car and the person who may be hit from the car, right? That's just an example of consumer protections, or even, workers' comp is a form of consumer protection or form of protection as it relates to trial lawyers, right? So you're at work and you're working a construction site and you slip and fall and you get a concussion and you break your arm, and then now your company doesn't want to compensate you and you got hurt on your job. Well, I used to work for the guys who were like, no, heck no, we're taking you to court. You're going to pay them. They were at work, they were doing their work, they got hurt, and you need to compensate them, right? And so you have various organizations that have their varied interests. And so they're looking for candidates that are in alignment with their interest. And so they're looking for those candidates so that they can support them in their race. And that way they have friends in whatever this elected position is. And so keeping in alignment with the trial lawyer issue, U.S. Senator who's pretty good on trial lawyers issues is Cory Booker, right? And so when I was on his race, I talked to trial lawyers from across the country who were grateful for his work as it related to workers' comp, who were grateful for his work as it related to bad faith, because people should be compensated, in my opinion and his opinion, if you're at work and you get hurt, right? It shouldn't be that you have to sit home. So PACs are organizations that have varied interests or very specific interests, and they're looking to support candidates who are in alignment with what they believe. And if you know this, I'm sorry, but I believe in telling it all and making sure that everyone's on the same page. Then you have individual donors. One of the individual donors you may hear a lot about is George Soros, right? He's a very progressive donor in the democratic structure, in the progressive ecosystem, right? And within the progressive ecosystem, he funds so many organizations because he believes in people. He believes in the American people, and he believed that we should have more than what we have right now, right? We should have fair representation in our elected officials. Our Congress should be reflective of our country, right? It shouldn't be just all white heterosexual men who are able-bodied. Like, that shouldn't be. That's not what America looks like. So he funds various types of entities. He is an individual donor. You have individual donors that can give $1 million or $100 million. You have individual donors that can give $5. Each of you on this call can be an individual donor. Then you have IE or super PACs. They don't give directly to candidates in most cases. That is illegal. There's a wall there. The wall is essentially they are not allowed to talk to individuals in PACs because they have different rules than those two entities as it relates to federal elections and most state elections. So super PACs and IEs, independent expenditures, are typically allowed to take in excessive amounts of money. So maybe you've heard recently in the news that there are almost 50 some odd billionaires who are supporting former President number 45's campaign, right? And these people are giving excessive amounts of money. And the idea is that they are supporting these super PACs, one, that typically don't disclose who their donors are, two, you can give unlimited amounts of resources to, and three, they are able to use those resources without any restrictions for the most part. So the example that I have on the page is the logo Roll C Action Fund. The Roll C Action Fund is a new arm and extension of the Congressional Black Caucus. Their entire job is to get major contributions from folks like George Soros and to use that money to turn out more voters in general, but specifically voters who are going to increase the number of Black elected officials in Congress for Congressional Black Caucus. And they would do that through the Roll C Action Fund. I am going to stop there because I said a lot, and I want to take a moment to answer folks' questions, if there are any.
And feel free to either raise your hand.
We did. Sorry to interrupt, Sarah. This is Neil speaking. We did have a question that was sent to me from Zach. Let me get on camera here. And this is kind of goes back to a previous question or previous point that you made in a previous slide, Kristin, about staffing. Mm-hmm. This is about local races, and this is from Zach. He asks, where do you find people for roles in fundraising for local races such as city council?
Yes. So number one, if you're running for city council, I hope that you talk to folks who have previously run for city council, and you can ask for recommendations there. Number two, your local progressive infrastructures, whether it be the Democratic Party or the local Progressive Caucus or the local Black Caucus, you would typically make a JD, a job description, and there are plenty on the internet. Like you can simply Google what you need, finance assistant, finance director, and be sure that it's tailored to your campaign. Or you can simply have a simple email that says, Isaac Borodokin, I hope I said that correctly. I'm looking for a finance director for my campaign for city council. The dates will range from a month before to a month after the race, that time period. Compensation is willing to be discussed because I'm assuming at this point you don't know how much you can pay. Looking to receive resumes and cover letters if you're interested in progressive politics for a local city council race, right? Or you can have someone do this on your behalf so that folks don't know that it's you that's looking, and they get your information out and announce before you're allowed to announce. So those are two ways that you can do it. One, recommendations through your local network of elected officials and people within the progressive infrastructure or within your network. And then two, folks that are within the progressive infrastructure and their network, because they are interested in helping folks get campaigns and get on campaigns and get paid and have jobs as well. So those are two easy ways. Any other questions?
This is Neil. Not right now. You can move on.
Okay, then.
And
all
we
right.
have some other questions we'll be addressing at the Q&A that we're holding that are not as related to this fundraising portion, but we'll certainly get to them.
Okay, then. Next slide, please. All right. What are all the ways that you can raise this money, as Cardi B would say? On this slide, you have artist Rihanna with a stack of money in her mouth, biting it, because that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to get the dough. You're trying to get the money, okay? These are some of the ways that you can raise money. One, I'm going to take my time and go through this because I want to be sure that I talk about each section. And again, if this is so elementary to you, I apologize, but I believe in covering the basics because a lot of times people jump out there and they think that they know something that they don't know. And I've been in, this line of work for a while to know that a lot of folks don't know what they're talking about when it comes to fundraising. So call time, literally, call time is you sitting in a room with your call time manager or by yourself. You have a list in front of you, or maybe you're using a customer relations management database like NGP or Numero, and they have apps. And so you're literally picking up your phone and you're calling people. You're saying, hey, my name is Kristin Broner. I'm running to be the next mayor of the city of Tampa. I would like to, thank you so much for picking up the phone. I want to tell you about my race. We'll get into what all the things you need to say. And then you ask them for the money, right? We'll get into that though. That's call time. 2, events, exactly what it sounds like. I do want to make the note that people think that when you have events, it's all about the ambiance and the food and the, what the freak ever. No, it could be some Cheez-It crackers out there and some juice and water, and folks are going to come because they're not there for the ambiance. They're there to give you money. So events through fundraising. Meetings, it's literally when you say, hey, I want to sit down with George Soros and ask him for $1 million for my race. So I'm going to reach out to his secretary and set up a meeting because I'm going to be on the Eastern Shore board, and so is he, and I will have an opportunity to meet him. Meetings. And then in that meeting, you tell them about your race, tell them about yourself, you get to know each other, you build rapport, and then you ask for the money. Bundling, we talked about this earlier. That's when somebody that it's very close to, that have a strong network, literally just goes to their network. There's no event involved typically. There's no meeting involved typically. They just like, hey, I need everybody to write 10 checks for $1,000 a piece. They get you $10,000. They mail it or have your intern or assistant or whoever your person is on your race come get the money, right? Digital phone and ads. I think Ms. Auburn is going to get into this, but this is the form of fundraising where you're sending emails, you have digital ads, you're on YouTube, you have sending out text messages, you have robocalls, you're asking people for money that way. Mail. Yes, plenty of people still use mail, especially our seasoned saints in the country, right? And they still use mail because a lot of them, that's what they're used to. So they will mail you a check. Typically, you can have a mail program where it's all about sending out letters to people who are likely to give to you and asking them to send contributions back. Hack, i.e. labor. We talked about this on the previous slide, but this is another form of raising money, another bucket of how you raise money. I'll stop and pause for questions.
Spotlight there. So I do want to get to a question that we had a little earlier. It's somewhat related, but I want to make sure we don't leave it to the end. It was someone asking about, can they attend the DNC convention in August? They've tried to apply as a delegate in Michigan. I let Neil handle, he's more familiar with that, but they were also talking about, I'm frustrated with the lack of access from the party. As a deaf person who truly cares about our community, I do plan to run for office as well. I recognize that funds for communication access are a barrier to overcome. And how can Disability Victory and ActBlue support? So this is something where I'll reach out afterward. It's certainly one of the challenges in fundraising. I guess I should put myself on screen here. Hold on. One of the challenges in fundraising whenever you're a disabled candidate is, of course, if you need accommodations, and how do you work that into your budget? So I think that's something that you need to consider in your budget, but I think it's also something where the wisdom of other disabled candidates can be very helpful. I don't know if you've connected, and I can reach out to you separately afterwards. With Neil McDevitt, he's a supporter of ours, and he is the first elected deaf mayor in the country. He ran first, he lost by 6 votes, I think, in his first campaign, and won by 6 in his second. I'm pretty sure that's the case. And communication access was, of course, an issue for him. So that's something where I think it's very personal to the access needs of the candidate. And as someone who isn't deaf or hard of hearing myself, and Neil isn't either, we're trying to make sure to connect candidates or prospective candidates with folks who have come before them on finding out the best strategies for running for office and how do you work that into a campaign. So if you reach out to our hello@disabilityvictory.org email, we'll work to connect you with Neil McDevitt, and hopefully you can connect over that and have a discussion. So hey.
Thank you, Sarah. May I have a time check? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, we are at 2:42.
Okay.
So I think, looking at my schedule here, I think we're have pretty good time here.
Great.
I left to like 3:05, 3:10 for
Perfect.
leave a couple minutes for Q&A. Then we want to take a quick 5-minute break for folks to be able to use the bathroom, because a 2-hour training can sometimes be a little challenging for folks to sit through, and then we'll move on.
Yes. All right. May I have the next slide, please? All right. What's next? So you want to be sure that we talked about this, your budget and your finance plan align, right? So essentially, again, budget is not something that's finance based. It is something that is campaign structure based. You want to set ambitious goals that are attainable. You want to log your projected goals, and you want to make a hard ask. And then you want to Rolodex call time and call time. Next slide, please. But first, you need a finance plan. So we are moving into an activity. And the activity is what you will do before you create a finance plan. So you're a candidate, you want to run for office, right? And essentially everyone thinks that they're just going to call up various organizations and get a bunch of money. That's not actually how that happens. What you would do first is Rolodex yourself. What is Rolodexing yourself? It is literally going through your network, making a Google slide, maybe a Google sheet, putting first name, last name, email, phone number, what you're going to ask them for, what they pledge to do, and whether that money actually came in, right? And so I typically ask candidates to do this at least 3 to 6 months before launching your campaign. And it's important because it helps you kind of gauge support, and it helps you gauge if you're actually able to raise the money you need to raise in order to win your race, right? Now, all of your money, you're not going to get through just your network, but a good portion of it should come from your network. So we're going to do an activity that is just like this. I want you, if you're running for office or not, to think about 10 people that you've met in the last year. And that you have not made any ask of, right? So you haven't asked them for money, to give to your grandmama's church potluck or whatever. And I want you to write their names down. This is an activity. So for example, for me, I met a young woman the other day. There was an event called Florida Black Girls in Politics. And I met a young woman who is based in St. Pete. I can't recall her name right now, but she and I hit it off. We're both very much Black feminists, Black women who are interested in the progressive ecosystem and building it out. And she is someone that if I was running for, I don't know, mayor, I would call and say, hey, my name is Kristin Broner. I'm thinking about running for mayor. I want to know if you would be interested in supporting my campaign. And that is the hard ask portion. But before I call her, I want to write her name down on a piece of paper or on a Google sheet. So I'll write her name down. Then I'll write my mom's name down. Then I'll write my granddaddy's name down. Then I'll write 10 more people's names down until I have created an entire list of my network. Folks from LinkedIn, folks from Facebook, folks from Twitter, folks from Instagram, folks in my phone, folks I went to college with, folks I worked on campaigns with, folks I had jobs with, previous clients. I should think about all of these people and who out of all of these people are marked people and most likely to support me. And I also want to have a slide that kind of a column that lets me know the likelihood of their giving, right? There are people that I met in college who would definitely still support me. And I'm sure there are people I met in college who probably don't remember me, but I remember them, right? So they'd probably be like second tier, third tier folks. But who are your first tier folks? What are their names? Who are they? What do they do? What's their phone number? What's their email? And if you were to make an ask of them for a contribution, how much would that ask be? If it's my mama, I'm straight up asking for her $4,000, no less. Now, if mama want to give it to me outright in full $1,000, great. But if she wants to break it up over the course of my campaign, that's great too. But I'm going to ask my mama for $1,000. I'm going to ask my granddaddy for about $2,500. Now, of course, keep in mind your limits for your race, right? So I want to take about 2 to 3 minutes, and I want you all to sit back and think about who is someone, up to 10 people, who could write you a contribution for your campaign. And I want you to tell me how likely they are to write that contribution. And so I am going to put on my little, well, it's 2:47. I'm going to stop talking and why you think that they would give to you. What are the issues that they care about? 2:47, 2 minutes on the clock. And I will be looking for volunteers.
And while folks are thinking about that, I think one question that we often get is, well, how do you know how much to ask? So I hope either, I don't know if you're going to address that in the next slides, but, you know, when people were thinking about, okay, well, I can ask this person, but I don't know them very well. How do I figure out what's a reasonable number to ask them?
Yeah. So first, again, it all depends on what's your maximum level contribution, right? And then one of the things you kind of think about is, what do they do? Are they a lawyer? Are they a doctor? Are they a public school teacher? You know, are they a local minister of a small congregation? And I think from there, that's kind of when, I hate to say this, but when common sense kind of kick in, right? If someone's a local public school educator and you're in Hillsborough County where I live, your starting pay is $30,000 at max 40, right? So I'm probably not going to ask you for $1,000. Probably going to ask you for about $25 or $50, right? Because that makes sense, right? But if you're a lawyer and you've been a lawyer for the last 15 years, and I've seen that you've brought in cases that have brought $10 million, $25 million settlements, and my max contribution is $1,000, I'm asking you for the $1,000. These are all prospective numbers that you are putting down. And a part of your job is to work with your team to figure out if these numbers are real, because they can do research and tell you if these people have given before, if they have capacity. And then sometimes it's a shot in the dark, right? If you call me and ask me for $500, I'm gonna laugh in your face. I've had people call me and ask me for $500 or $1,000. And I'm glad people think that that's, you know, something that I'm willing to give, but I'm a $250 max contributor, everything under, right? At max, I'll give $250. More than likely, I'm a $50, $100 contributor, right? Grassroots supporter. So that's some of the thought process that goes into what you're asking and whom you're asking. If your mama and daddy, you know, they live in a big house, they got nice cars, you know, you need to be asking mama and daddy for the max contribution. It is 2:50. We are over time. I am going to pick on someone out of the chat unless someone wants to volunteer to talk to me about their Rolodex. If you would go to the next slide.
Okay. And we got a comment in the chat. You can also look up publicly available information to find out how much assets people have and figure out what a disposable amount for them is. As well as that, I would add, you know, the FEC donor database. There are tools that you can, as you had mentioned, see what people have donated.
Correct. Do I have a volunteer?
Feel free to raise your hand.
Ooh, I don't see anyone. I'm gonna
shy
call
today.
on somebody. I'm gonna call on Sherry Myers.
Oh. See? If not, I can also. Oh, Mary Gonzalez is asking how to raise your hand. I will give you the mic. Ask to unmute. Mary. Sherry is off the hook.
Okay. Hi, thank you. I'm a poor retired attorney, and I'm actually thinking of doing a write-in campaign,
Mm-hmm.
and I have some public support. I've been working on some anti-oil issues. I'm thinking of running for city council.
Okay.
So the 10 people I have are like all the people we've been going door to door with Sierra Club to work on this anti-oil campaign in my little city. So I'm thinking of my college people, my law school supporters, and a
Yes.
lot of fellow attorneys, and then all the recent people that I've been meeting on this campaign, which just happened to fall in line if I run.
Yes. And did you put numbers by their names, like what you plan to ask them for?
Um, my attorney friends will be in the 250 range. The more private attorneys will be in the 500, and then my anti-oil people will probably be anywhere from 10 to 50 because it's a pretty small city.
I love that. And what is your experience like writing these names down and putting numbers to them? Have you done this before?
Yes, I've
Okay.
worked in political campaigns, and actually I worked for Congressman Becerra when he was a congressman for the Hispanic caucus, so I've had to manage some of his fundraising.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of good ideas, although I'm a little rusty.
It's okay to be rusty. Did you put any new names down? Like people you've met within the last year?
Yeah, all these anti-oil people.
Okay.
We have an activist who's 92 years old and still drives.
I love it.
Well, I'll ask her for $5, for example.
Yes. As you should. Well, thank you for volunteering.
Thank you.
And that's really all you have to do, folks. If you're going to run for office, sit down and take the time to put first name, last name down on a piece of paper. Think about what you're going to ask them for. And again, as I mentioned earlier, and as it was mentioned in the chat, you can look up their public finance record if they have one. So FEC or your state or local campaign finance website, whatever that may be, right, where you are. Give you an idea if they've given before, how much they can give. And if not, we are using, reasoning skills to say, hey, this person is a teacher and the starting salary in my county is about $30,000. So I probably can only ask her for about $5 to $25. And you're going to do this for weeks at a time. You're going to do this, right? And by the time you build this list and you do that sum column at the top, you'll see how much money you could project prospectively, you can actually raise for your campaign, right? And then everything after that is, of course, trying to bring in new people, as even Miss Mary mentioned, that she's a former lawyer, she's a former political operative, she has connections, she has people, but then she has all of these new people, and she needs to go ask them for their money too, right? And that's what it takes. That is rolodexing. It's so simple, I promise you, but so many people skip this step and it makes it hard to fundraise, because when you have the time to actually think about who could be supportive of your campaign on the front end, is a whole lot easier than when you're in the midst of knocking on doors, arguing with the, candidate on the other side of the aisle, whomever they may be, or maybe it's a primary, you're trying to do, op-eds, you're trying to meet local, folks that can vote for you. It's hard to do it in the midst of the campaign. But if you do the work on the front end of the campaign, then you're able to see how much you can actually potentially raise. And you also have to keep in mind, every dollar isn't going to come in, but you want to work for every dollar to come in. All right, next slide. All right, so this is a fundraising plan example. And so essentially what you see here is, once you finish doing this Rolodex activity that you do on the front end of the campaign before you launch, then you want to use that information to build out your fundraising plan, right? Because you're eventually going to call all of those people. You're going to ask them for the contribution, and they're going to tell you, hey, I can't do it right now. You say, hey, when can you do it? And they say, oh, I can't do it until August or September, but I promise to give you $100. Then you start slotting in when this money is going to come in. You start slotting in, Miss Mary Jo said that she's going to do a fundraiser for you in December. And as you slot all of this into your fundraising plan, it begins to inform you of your cash flow. And your cash flow informs your budget because it tells your budget when they can actually spend money, right? When you can go up on TV, when you can buy a mailer, when you can put out digital advertisement on Hulu and YouTube, right? And so this is all, everything ties back in. It's all synergetic. It's all working together in order for you to have a seamless campaign. But the work has to be done first on the front end. I'll stop there and ask if there are any questions.
Yes, we do have a question from Lydia. I feel equally awkward about asking people I know are poor for money as I do asking people who I know are wealth privileged for a large amount of money. Do you have suggestions for getting over the discomfort? I've been doing so anyways, but it's not an emotionally pleasant experience.
All right. We're going to hold that question to slide 17, and we're going to power through these next 2 slides because your question is going to be answered because I'm going to make you do it. All right. So now that you've Rolodexed yourself, you're building your finance plan, just some additional things for you to consider. You know, we talked about this on the front end. What is your win number? You know, what media market do you live in? What seat are you currently running from? What's the maximum contribution? What level is that donor currently given at? Is it time, you know, and then if they're a previous donor, is it time to ask them to increase their support? And I want you to think about this after you Rolodex, because then it begins to inform what you know to be true about your campaign. I Rolodexed myself and I know that I have $150,000 in potential donors, right? Now I need to call them and ask them to actually give that money. I only need $200,000 for my race, right? So then now that you know that you could potentially raise $150,000, you only need $200,000, then that begins to inform, you know, what else you can raise. And, you know, we'll have ActBlue talk about digital fundraising. But this is not a part of that yet, right? This is all just your network. We haven't done ads for fundraising like you probably see right now on Instagram where Kamala Harris is popping up and she's like, we've worked together and I know you don't want Donald Trump. Send $20 now, right? That's not even that. That's like none of this right now. This is just your network. How amazing is that? When we do the work on the front end, we ensure that it informs our fundraising plan. Then we're able to build on it for digital fundraising, mail program fundraising, meeting fundraising, and everything else. Next slide. I'm going to try to rush through this. Ways to manage all of this. At some point, you want to, and I'll stop because I think we need to do transition. At some point, as you're doing this work, you need to be sure that you're tracking this work. So as you're doing your donor research, you need to use that information for your Rolodex that you're using and put it into a CRM database. You want to make sure you understand campaign PAC limits. You want to make sure you understand the donation limits from organizations and unions. Again, going back to Ms. Mary, she just talked about all of these Sierra Club people, you know, how much can they give as an organization and then how much can they give as an individual? You also want to do research on your opponents, right? And that's important too, because you want to know who's given to them. Some of these folks are transactional donors. They'll give to you as well. And then you want to be sure that you have campaign staff who can help you with this. And this is just a way to manage it all. And again, this is before you announce. And then after you announce, you're still going to try to manage it all through the CRM databases and through understanding what organizations are interested in helping you as a candidate. Next slide. So now, after you know what finance is, you know what a finance department, who's in the finance department, you know your role, you've Rolodexed yourself, you've done research on the candidate, you've done research on your current network, you've started building a finance plan. Now it's time to launch the campaign, or maybe you're already in the campaign and you need to start asking those people that you put on that Rolodex document for their actual money. So to my friend who asked the question, who I don't remember your name, I'm sorry, who said, I don't like asking nobody for money, essentially. What are some things that you can do to get over it? Well, you could talk to yourself one. This is probably someone who has a vested interest in whatever the cause may be, that I have the same vested interest in. And if I call them and tell them that I am running for this office, they probably will want to support because they want to be sure that someone has their best interest at heart. Someone is willing to be an advocate for them. So if we use, let's find a candidate, Stacey Abrams, right? When she was not only minority leader, but as she was running for governor, she was very clear about how she wanted to enact change in terms of healthcare, right? And so there are a lot of people who work in healthcare who are not making $60,000 even at minimum, right? But you still want to have some type of outreach to them and ask them to support your campaign financially, right? Because you know that having this person in office is a benefit to the work you do and a benefit to the people you support. So that's one thing, talking to yourself and talking to yourself logically about why this makes sense to ask this person for this money. Two, I would say that you simply hype yourself up. What do I mean by that? Put you on some good music, hype yourself up, be like, I could do this. It don't even matter. What's the worst that they could say to me? No, you say all of those things to yourself. You hype yourself up. I'm good for putting on some like DMX. I don't know if you all know DMX, the rapper. He's passed away now, but he was an older rapper. I'll put some music on that gets me like going, gets me pumped, do some power stances, you know, they talk about the power stance, do some of those. And then I just rehearse, get myself pumped up and rehearse. And those are just some tactics that I tell people to use. Again, it's not ever going to be just easy as sipping tea, right? But it's about the work we do. So let's talk about the hard ask. The hard ask is when you now call those people that you have rolodexed and put on a piece of paper and said that I'm going to call, and you actually ask them for the money. So a hard ask is clear, it's specific, and it's concise. Here's an example. My name is Kristin Broner. I'm calling you today because I am running to be the next mayor of the city of Tampa, Florida. I would love to earn and gain your support for my race. You have been a longtime friend of mine, and I hope you will support me, right? Would you consider giving a contribution to my campaign today or on X date, whenever the campaign launches, of $500? That's to someone I probably know or have rapport with. If you're calling someone you don't know, and say, for instance, your campaign is already off the ground and you're calling people you don't know, you would go, hi, my name is Kristin Broner. I'm running to be the next governor of the state of Florida. I'm calling you today because I would learn to earn and gain your support for my campaign and also learn what matters to you. Do you have a moment to chat today? They'll tell you yes or no. They say yes. Well, look, this campaign is a people-centered campaign. We are focused on putting money back into the everyday Floridians' pockets. We're interested in ensuring that folks can pay their bills and have not only a way to make a living for themselves, but the ability to live a good life. We're also fighting for our teachers. It is important that every child gets a good quality education here in our state, but it's also important that we support the educators that are teaching our children. This race is about people. This race is about our future. And I'm wondering if those things matter to you. And if I could count on your support today. And they'll say, yes, no, those things matter to me. Oh, no, those things, I'm really concerned about the environment. Great, tell me about the environment. Tell me what matters to you. Oh, we need to stop building in the Everglades, blah, blah, blah. Yes, I agree. In my campaign, I am going to do X to support the stop building in the Everglades. Thank you so much for your call today. I'm wondering if you could support my race for a contribution of $10,000. And then you wait. You let them tell you if they can give you a contribution or not. Don't say, well, if 10,000 is too much, we can take it down to 1,000. Or if 10,000 is too much, we're going to take it down to 5,000. You're going to talk yourself right out of a contribution. Don't do that. So whatever you have on that paper and you've done your research, you looked up their giving, you think it's a good ask, you ask them for it, and then you close your mouth. And they'll say yes or no. And if they say no, I just don't know, you say, oh, well, are you supporting someone in the race? Can I keep you on the phone list? Can I call you back again? Oh, sure, right? Or they'll tell you, no, I'm not interested, support another candidate. Cool, hang up. But if they say yes, that's all you call to get, and you've succeeded. right? And so we don't have to think too much about this. We're calling people who potentially have the same concerns that we have, who desire and have the same goals for our country, our states, our local municipalities as we have, and we just need to ask them for the money. So at this time, we're going to go to the next slide. Another activity. So we're going to take 3 minutes. And at this time, we're not going to break up into pairs because that's unnecessary. But you've just launched your campaign and you're calling your first potential donor. You know that they've donated $1,000 to candidates before. I want you to take 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and write down some bullets of how you would structure that ask. What do I mean by that? Kind of how I did. My name is Kristin Broner, running for such and such office. Can I talk to Judy Bloom today? Judy Bloom, let me tell you about myself. Do you have a moment? Blah, 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 blah. And then the ask, right? So structure it, whatever it is, right? Write it down. Write your little bullets down. And then I'm going to call on someone, or hopefully I'll have a volunteer who's willing to make the hard ask. Time is 3:07. Giving it 2 minutes.
And I see we had a question from someone who has to leave. Is it possible to get the recording or material via email? We will be posting a recording of this in a couple of days once we get it all through post-production captioning and make sure that that is all accurate. So we will be sure to share that with you all via email.
1 minute remaining. All right, do we have a volunteer? It's a quiet crowd. All right, I'm gonna call on Zach Borodikin. Oh, Miss Mary's back too. But let me see if Zach says anything first, Miss Mary. Zach, are you still there? Nah. Okay, no response from Zach. Miss Mary, which I've been making calls for weeks now. It hurts my soul. Miss Mary, do you want to go?
Sure. So I guess I would start with, I see that you've donated in the past to some causes that we both believe in. And from what you've supported in the past, it aligns with my goals as a candidate. And in particular, I want to ask you for $1,000, especially because one of my campaign goals is to start term limits in our city, because that's never happened before. But I think I can only ask you for 500 because I think that's what we're limited to doing. So can I count on you for $500 to start new leadership in our little city?
Well, Mary, tell me a little bit about yourself. Why you're running?
I moved to an oil field and I thought I would just have to put up with it, but we have an opportunity under new leadership from the state and our senator to end oil drilling in Signal Hill. And I've gathered a group of people. I've done a writing campaign. We've gone door to door, and we've got serious support for turning around our town. But we also need new leadership.
Thank you, Mary. I would love to support your campaign.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for jumping on. So first things first, let's talk about Miss Mary's ask. Always introduce yourself. Always say your name. Always tell a little bit about yourself, right? But also be very confident, right? Because these people don't know you from a hill of beans, right? So if they tell you no, whatever. And if they tell you yes, you've gained a friend. So don't be shy. Be confident. I know it's hard. I know it seems daunting. I know folks don't want to ask folks for money because it's just like, you can't be serious. I have to ask someone for $1. I have to ask someone for $5. But be confident, right? And then be sure to make your heart ask, right? Can I count on you for X amount of dollars? And when? When? Is it today? Is it tomorrow? Is it by the end of the month, right? So that hard ask needs to be clear, concise, and specific. And I guess I should probably add on to there, it should have a date, a deadline, a timeline, right? I should probably add that to the slide, because if you're just asking $500, they may give you $500 next year. You probably need it before the end of the month. You probably need it on the day you launch. So that is the hard ask. Are there any questions? I know some of you have messaged me. I'm sorry. I didn't realize that was a direct message. And they're like, I hate call. I hate this. Hearing and seeing none, I'm going to move on. Questions? And you can go to the last slide, because that's the end of the presentation.
And we'll have chance for questions. So we have a couple minutes for questions, and we're going to just go to a quick break, bathroom break, and then we will be talking about digital fundraising. So hope you will all stick around for that as well. And thank you for such a wonderful presentation on fundraising.
No problem. No one has questions. That's interesting. I wonder, are most people already running for office? I wonder if that's the case, because some of you are in my inbox and you're telling me you're already running.
I got a question here. Wondering what kind of things we can say about ourselves, assuming whenever you're introducing yourself as a candidate.
Yes, say the things that are in alignment with your campaign. So my faux example that I always use, my name is Kristin Broner. I'm running to be the next mayor of the city of Tampa, Florida. I believe that it is time to give our city back to the citizens. I believe our city is experiencing overdevelopment. Our city is becoming too expensive that the average Tampanian can no longer live here. I believe that it is time that we start investing in our infrastructure here in the city. And so things that are in alignment with your campaign. One, you want to tell about your campaign, and then things you want to tell about yourself is what you've done and what you've accomplished, or what makes you capable to do the job. So for more than a decade, I've been a problem solver. I've solved issues dealing with elections, dealing with public policy. I've helped pass bills throughout the South that have made our states better and stronger, whatever those bills may be. And you talk about the things that you've accomplished and how that directly ties to the work that your campaign believes in, and how that translates into you being an elected official for this particular position. Is that helpful?
And they said, yes, thank you.
Yes. Miss Mary, I see.
Mary, do you have a question? I can let you unmute.
Yeah, don't we also have to file with the FEC before we start raising money? I mean, not the FEC.
Well, you're local. So the reason I didn't get into that, because that's more compliance based, right?
Okay, no worries.
But the answer is yes, right? Some people put their compliance together, some people don't, right? A lot of times finance is its own thing. But yes, before you become a candidate, you have to file whatever the required documents are in your state or city for the particular office that you're running for. right? So if I was running to be the next governor of the state of Florida, then I would have to file that information in Tallahassee. I would have to have created a bank account, an organization. I would have to have a chairperson. And then I would have to also give a statement of my finances, a statement of what I do, why I'm running. Like there's so much paperwork required, right? And so every city, every election, every state is different. From the federal standpoint, when launching a campaign, the best thing that you can do is get yourself a compliance firm. I do not recommend anyone doing their own compliance unless you are a lawyer like yourself, Miss Mary, and you are easily able to go in and read what's needed and figure it out, right? Because what you don't want to do is land yourself in FEC jail like a former president, right? So the FEC requires that you fill out various forms as well. You have a chairperson for your committee, which is typically your compliance firm. You do have to give a statement of your finances, but you typically don't have to do that until a couple of months into your race. And then of course the FEC has quarterly filing deadlines. And as you get closer to the campaign election, you move into the weekly and then daily reporting.
Thank you.
Yes, Lydia, you have to read all of the campaign finance regulations. So I didn't talk about that again, because this is more finance based, but before you launch your campaign, when I typically do presentations, I do both compliance, finance, as well as budget, right? Because all three of those things go hand in hand. And I think it's important to talk about these things on the front end before launching your campaign. So the very same as you doing a Rolodex before you launch your campaign, you should have already figured out what reports you need to file in order to be an official candidate, what reports you need to file in order to have an official organization, because your campaign is what I like to call a mini tech organization. You're going to scale it up. You're going to start a business, you're going to scale it up, and then you're going to scale it down, right? And, you know, that business can be anywhere from $10,000 to $10 million, right? And so essentially there are requirements for that, and quarterly reporting, each position is different. But typically when you're talking about it from FEC standpoint, you have multiple multiple documents that you have to fill out prior to running, prior to starting a campaign, prior to even hiring folks.
Thank you. So we are going to take a quick break. Thank you again, Kristin, for such a wonderful presentation. Fundraising is such an important skill also for Disability Victory, because we're constantly fundraising for our own programming. So it's always good to get, refreshers on it. And that was wonderful. So we are going to take just a quick break while we get set up for the next presentation, and also to give folks time to use the restroom. So we will be starting in, let's say, 5 minutes, so 3:24. Forgot to unmute. Okay, so it is 3:24. So we are ready to move on to the second part of our presentation, an intro to digital fundraising with Auburn Hicks from ActBlue. Find you on screen here so I can pin you. Hold on, there we go. That's fine. There we go.
Thank you, Sarah. Welcome back, everyone. Again, I am Auburn Hicks. I am an ActBlue MECO associate, so I work on the 501c3, 501c4 side of things. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a Black woman with shoulder-length curly hair wearing a beige top, and my background is blurred. Go to the next slide. So getting into our objectives today, we just had such a wonderful presentation from Kristin, and we definitely have a little bit of overlap in our content. So some of these elements I'll be able to breeze through probably a little bit for us today. But if anybody has questions, of course, we can stop and get more into the nitty gritty. But our learning objectives are going to be the following. We're going to first acknowledge the personal emotions around asking for money. Then we're going to collectively understand the building blocks of digital fundraising, including the importance of leveraging small dollar donors. Next, we're going to identify the steps that your campaign needs to dive into digital fundraising. And then finally, we're going to discover how to best leverage ActBlue as a digital fundraising resource. Thank you. So we've touched on this a bit as a collective already, and I'm just glad that everybody's feeling so open in the space to share how difficult it can be to ask for money. It can be very challenging, and it can bring up a lot of different types of emotions in different people. It's super important, though, to remember that you're not alone in how you feel about asking for money, like we've been touching on. And sometimes it's helpful to reframe asking for money as giving someone who wants to make a difference an opportunity to do so. We know that when we're first getting started out in the digital fundraising space, be it for a campaign or a charitable organization, we're often leaning on our friends and our family, those true intimate relationships in our lives, to start our fundraising programs up. And yeah, it can feel a bit strained, and all of those emotions are totally valid, and sometimes they're contradictory. Exercise that sometimes I do in certain spaces when discussing this subject is coming up with two emotions that are both true surrounding how one feels about asking for money, but those two emotions contradict one another. Like for me personally, I know that I feel proud when I'm advocating for an organization, but I also feel tired a lot of the time. Asking for money can be exhausting. Having those expectations that are not always met by our network, it can be draining. We all know that. So it's just important to remember again that you're not alone in it. Practice, I would say practice makes perfect. Practice makes it a bit easier. You know, the more you do it, the better you get at it, the better you get at advocating for yourself and your cause. But it's something that's difficult for so many of us. And it's just good to be aware of that and to keep that in mind. Thanks so much. Next slide. So once we've addressed our emotions and we've called ourselves in and we're ready to make that ask, why is it so important that we focus on small dollar donors in the first place? Our network of donors creates a diverse revenue stream for any organization or any campaign that we are fundraising for. Small dollar donors have given over $13 billion to groups on ActBlue since 2004. It really is a space where so many folks are able to initiate their philanthropic journey in a lot of instances. And collectively, we're able to build strong people-powered movements to enact the change that we all want to see and that we do have the power to create when we unite with one another. Next slide, please, Sarah. So what is digital? That's the overarching question of the time we're spending together. So digital fundraising is when you leverage all of your digital channels. So that's going to be email, social media, and you're going to, of course, leverage those collectively to strategize to drive small dollar donor engagement and increase the donation amounts that you have coming in. The most effective digital fundraising programs are the ones that meet small dollar donors where they're at and provide as many on-ramps as possible for folks to join a cause. So that's why it's great to try to educate yourself across the platform in the digital fundraising space so that no matter where anybody's living, for the most part, you'll have access to them or a touch point for them to get involved. So digital fundraising helps you build and run a sustainable and innovative fundraising program that can reach across the country and build relationships with engaged small dollar donors. It's, of course, amazing when you are able to activate your network, but we want to reach far beyond our networks. We want to reach folks that are on the other side of the country that also care about the causes that we do and get them activated. And the digital fundraising space, that is what it does best. And proceed to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so we're going to dig into some overarching pillars of digital fundraising or just the digital fundraising presence or space. So of course, there's digital communication. Examples of this would be social media, video content, also design elements. You know, a lot of organizations might have a marketing team, but there are plenty that do not have that kind of bandwidth and that you might be doing a lot of that work solo. What's beautiful about ActBlue is that we do have contribution forms that are really seamlessly embedded into your website that look super expert level, but are really accessible and can just give that overall presence of someone who maybe has a bit more of a literacy in the digital fundraising space than you might have currently. Then, of course, there's digital organizing. Examples of this would be online event hosting, similar to what we're all doing here together today. Also, of course, there's SMS programs, getting that text line of entry to your constituents is an amazing thing because it's super accessible. It's easy for people just to click a link and give directly to you. And then organizing on social media is also a huge aspect of the digital fundraising space naturally. And again, like we touched on before, those on-ramps to access, a lot of us spend our recreational time in social media spaces. That is a wonderful place to get engaged with a new donor or keep a relationship building with a current donor. And then in digital fundraising, examples would be your website. Of course, that's the home, that's the hub, that's mothership. That's where everything's going to live for the most part. Links to absolutely everything that you do have cooking in the digital fundraising space. And then there's community raising. And then, of course, there's also bread and butter, your email program, which we're going to dig into a couple of aspects of each of these pillars moving forward. But that's always going to be a wonderful place to get started for a lot of folks, is that email program. And then, of course, there are digital ads. And then once again, another pillar of digital fundraising is going to be the SMS program. So your campaign website, like I said, this is mothership. This is a place for supporters to learn about your campaign and get involved. In this space, you want to use recognizable, consistent, and simple branding. You also want to use inclusive and empowering language. This is where you're representing yourself. And so, of course, the language is going to follow suit with who you are. And that is so important as people develop their relationship and their connection to you and your cause further. You also, of course, want to share your email address, your social media links, all of the ways that people can get in touch with you and all the ways that they can engage. You want those to be represented on your campaign website. Also, of course, it's important that your website is optimized for mobile. More than half of our 2021 ActBlue donations were made through a mobile device. So, of course, we have done the work to make sure that pathway is clear and ready for you. But it's very important that you do your best to make sure that your campaign website lends itself to that. Another aspect of what we're able to offer is adding a donate button that links directly to your ActBlue form. Embedding that form on your website is a wonderful way just to make sure that you're able to track exactly what kinds of forms are getting the most interaction and donation and bringing in the most donations. And that's something that we can always assist you with. Thanks, Sarah. All right, so digging into social media a little bit here. So you want to engage with your supporters and build long-term relationships. And like I touched on before, we all love to be on social media. A lot of us are on our phones all the time. This is a space where, you know, we're skimming through and our algorithm might show us a seared chicken thigh recipe. And then the next thing is an ActBlue advertisement or something about a campaign or an event that's coming up in your area. So of course, it's wonderful to have a presence in those spaces where that algorithm can pick up on you and start to propel you out to folks that would be interested in what you have going on. So it's important to determine which platforms your supporters use the most. Also, social media enables you to calendar out the social media posts for your campaign or your organization and leverage big moments. Those big moments might be something that you have going on personally or specifically with your journey, or just big moments throughout the year. I know that, especially for me, working with organizations that advocate for Black advocacy, criminal justice reform, and disability rights, we have countless moments throughout the year where there are just things happening in current events that propel the donor base forward, that get people activated, and they're searching and seeking out organizations that they can give to, so they feel like they're making a difference when they feel a little bit helpless when those rapid response moments happen. So it's so important to be able to just basically map out how often you're going to be creating those touch points, and you're able to do that on social media. Also, you're able to follow community members, other campaigns and organizations with similar missions, and then key stakeholders in your campaign. And the beauty of that is that that's a public-facing network. Your followers, your supporters are able to see what organizations you're in alignment with, that you co-sign, that you love on, and they love back on you. And maybe that makes them want to give to them or find you through someone else's network on social media. So it's great to develop those connections, not only with your network, but also with other organizations. It's also a great space to model authenticity. You want to be yourself through and through in these areas. That makes you more relatable, more approachable. People are more excited to engage with you because you feel more tangible when you're in these social media spaces. So it really is quite priceless engagement. And then, of course, you always want to post quality content, whether that be a video or a post or you're going live or anything in that sphere. It's wonderful just to make sure that you are curating every aspect of your engagement to be in alignment with your campaign website, with the donation forms that you might be curating on ActBlue's platform. All of it sort of needs to feed and talk to each other in the best way that they can. Thank you. So digital ads, they help you reach a wider audience. Considering the location and the reach of your ad, diving into those analytics. Examples of digital ads, of course, would be Google ads, Facebook ads, YouTube, and other streaming services. They can help you ensure consistent branding with your website and social media, and they just further propel your ability to know your audience, including potential donors and voters. Next slide, please, Sarah. Thank you. So SMS program. Getting back to text, we keep it short, sweet, and quick to link. So SMS is, of course, our text messaging on our cell phones. When asking for a donation or selling event tickets, consider asking small dollar donors to sign up for SMS updates. This will enable you to share updates about your campaign or your organization, provide future opportunities for digital fundraising asks. You can have a disclaimer anywhere when you ask for someone's phone number, because of course you always want to offer an unsubscribe or opt-out option. We all know what it is to be inundated with text messages on our phone. It's something that a lot of folks are frustrated with, and we definitely don't want to oversaturate our network, but it is still a really wonderful way when utilized strategically to keep in touch and keep folks updated, because peer-to-peer messaging can have a better response rate than email or social media oftentimes. So email program. So the vast majority of digital fundraising contributions from small dollar donors do come through email. In digital fundraising, email is still number one. A lot of the majority of digital fundraising contributions from small dollar donors come through email, and email allows us to make direct asks. Plus, it's inexpensive and flexible. That's one of my favorite aspects about email communication, is that you can schedule things out. You can create an entire calendar of how you're going to be creating those touch points with your network throughout the year. Often email programs where you're able to do those mass emails are relatively affordable. And it's just a wonderful way to keep in touch. Folks don't feel as oversaturated because it is an elective thing where they're going through their inbox and combing through. And then also you're able to curate a variety of touch points. So one might be more of an ask. We often want to include an ask in almost every email, but something might be more driven towards like support our upcoming gala, or support this upcoming event that we have, or join this email blast list. But often you can also just include emails that further your narrative and your story with your network and help them feel a little bit more inside when it comes to what you have coming up and what you're strategizing. So like I was touching on a bit there, the best emails utilize the theory of change, sorry, they have a little typo there, which tells your small dollar donors the reason why they're taking an action and can make a difference in something that they care about. So this theory of change, the formula is do X so that Y to achieve Z. So X could be any action at all. It could be donating, it could be volunteering, it could be signing a petition, but it's so important when we're sending these emails out that they understand what X is going to achieve, because that makes them feel more empowered in their actions and more likely to engage. I think we're going to do a little switch off here. So I'll pause. Thank you so much. Awesome. Next slide, please. So community raising, fundraising together. This is something that we love to see on our platform and that we're seeing more and more of. So building relationships with other organizations and creating new pockets of supporters is what we're all about. So using ActBlue's platform, you can create tandem fundraising forums. So this is an opportunity for campaigns, organizations, and charities to fundraise for multiple groups on a single contribution form. And then the donor is therefore empowered to easily split up their contribution amongst these organizations, often all advocating for a similar cause. It's super accessible. It is a wonderful way for organizations to learn more about each other, and also for their donor base to learn more about organizations that they're in alignment with. And it can just be something that is a wonderful way to kick off in the ActBlue space. If you have an organization that you often do and create events with, get on the same forum, start pushing that out on your social media and see just where we can take you when it comes to linking up and seeing what we can make possible. Next slide. All right, so some tools to kick off digital fundraising. A campaign website and social media pages to share your mission and your messages is pretty base camp. We understand that that's super important when we're diving into the digital fundraising space. Also, of course, the campaign email address and platform to send mass emails to build relationships with your donors and your supporters. A customer relationship management platform to track your donors. So a CRM is going to hold all the details about your donor base, where they're located, if they're a recurring donor, all those kinds of information, and then those can bleed into your ActBlue account. So those can be linked so that they're talking to each other, informing one another. So if you have a platform like Every Action or something like that, we have a direct embed for you to integrate that into ActBlue. A fundraising platform for donors to give to your campaign, also an essential. And an example of that would be, of course, ActBlue. So here is a little registration form. Of course, I know Sarah and Neil will have everyone's information that participated today, and I'll be sharing my contact information in just a couple of slides here. If you have any interest in linking up and talking to myself or one of my colleagues about how to propel your mission forward, but you can also scan this QR code if you're interested and tell us more about yourself and why you're here and what you have going on, just so we can further understand how we can support you in that. Leave that up for a sec if anybody's interested. Okay, sweet. So ActBlue as a digital fundraising resource. We're going to just shift the lens and tighten a little bit on ActBlue for a couple of slides here. So why use us? Why use ActBlue? A wonderful aspect is that the platform has no hidden fees. It's only 3.95% credit card processing fees that get passed along. And setting up an account is quick and easy. It's something that somebody like myself can do for you or alongside you. We have more than 22,000 groups that trust us to process their small dollar donations every day. And a lot of your supporters are more than likely already among our 14 million plus express donors, which means that their credit card information is already saved in our database. And of course, when someone decides, they make that decision that they want to give to our organization or our campaign, we want that to be as seamless as possible. We don't want there to be any hurdles there. And when they're already a member of our express donor base, they're able to click, and it's done. And they're already getting their receipt sent to them for any sort of tax purposes. And then if they have any questions or have any issues with their donation, they will contact us directly and we handle that aspect for you. Next slide, please. So ActBlue makes it super easy to understand your donations by providing user-friendly and real-time analytics. You can always hop on a call with somebody like myself or a member of my team where we're able to walk you through all the data that's coming in. You're able to pull reports to see peak giving seasons throughout the calendar year, strategize around ones that are coming up, and just see maybe what happened, what worked for you well last year and how you can bring it into the coming year. You can also use this data to drive decision-making, download data easily, create strategy, and feel motivated to reach your goals. See, we have a question in the chat if I'm able to scroll down. Oh, great. I love to hear that, Lydia. That's awesome. All right. Next slide, please. So we here at ActBlue are your digital fundraising resource. We are here to help you build those contribution forms that you can embed into your campaign or organization website to share with small dollar donors. Those forms are unlimited, mobile optimized, and they can be customized with your own branding because we all know how satisfying it is when everything has the same aesthetic. Also, we're here to help you leverage digital wallet options to streamline the fundraising process. So we've got Google Pay, Apple Pay, PayPal, and Venmo available for your constituents to give through. Also, like I touched on a little bit ago, you can check out real-time analytics to learn which strategies resonate best with your supporters and drive that decision-making process. We're a great alternative to cash your checks. Of course, we know that mail-in is still something that works for a lot of folks. I work with many chapters of the NAACP across our country, and a lot of those folks still mail in checks. And while that's always going to be appreciated, still, it's a wonderful alternative that a lot of people have deemed as being safe because it is very, very safe to give through. So if you have a donor base that maybe has a little bit of anxiety surrounding digital fundraising, we're a great way to ease them into the process. All right, so you have access to live digital fundraising support at all times when you're on our platform. So a representative like myself, we are here to answer your questions. We're always just an email away. And if you ever can't get in contact directly with your point person, like I said, I work with criminal justice reform, Black advocacy, and disability rights organizations. But if you are working in a different cause space and you have a different person and they don't get back to you, you can always reach out to our support@actblue.com. And you got tons of folks just waiting and rearing to get your questions answered there. And if you want to get started and you have interest, but you kind of just still maybe want to play around a little bit, again, it's a pressure-free zone. It's because it's free to join up. And so you can go to actbluesetup.com and create an account and start to just play around on the platform, see how accessible and easy it is. And then when you're ready to move forward, you can always reach out and we can get you fully set up and activated with your EIN information. So, recommended next steps following the training that we've had here today with the wonderful folks at Disability Victory. It's great to just take inventory of your campaign's tools or your organization's tools that you're currently using for digital fundraising. Are you missing anything? Or do you feel like you're ready to hop right in? We can meet you in either place, but you also want to ensure that your campaign website follows the recommended best practices that we touched on a bit. As well as consider how to leverage digital ads for your campaign. That's something that we can also advise you on a bit. We're not able to give direct connections to different digital ad campaign processors, but we can also just sort of assist you with figuring out how to get into that space. You can map out your social media and SMS messaging strategy. That's something that you definitely want to implement if you haven't just yet, and identify other campaigns or organizations to fundraise together. So we look forward to connecting with you, anybody who would be interested. We are very proud to have been assisting Disability Victory for over a year now, as well as a lot of other really amazing organizations advocating for disability rights. My email is listed here, ahicks@actblue.com, as well as an image of myself in front of some leafy greens and a tan top, just to give that description. But yeah, we really are just so excited to work with the organizations that choose to utilize our platform. And something that's really enriching about it, again, is that, like I've listed out sort of the turf areas that I work with. These are all areas that I have a direct connection and passion for. And you will find that with any member of my team on the 501c3 and 501c4 side of things, that we're all folks who work in these spaces in our personal time as well as our professional time. And just thank you so much again to Neil and Sarah for partnering with us in this training today. And I have just had a blast listening to Kristin and all of your wonderful questions and input, and would really love to talk more with anybody who's on this call today.
Excellent. And with that, we will open up for Q&A. So please feel free to raise your hand or put questions in the chat. One, to kick us off, I think one good question, especially for folks who are just starting to campaign, is how do these ActBlue tools integrate with your website or your email program, like to make sure that is you're able to use those effectively. People don't have to click through too many things to go to other sites.
Yeah, definitely. So like I touched on a little bit before, we're able to embed your contribution forms, which would be the main thing that you're putting out there into the space, directly onto your website. It's a beautiful thing for someone to go to your homepage, and I always love to see it right at the top, a big donate button. We want that to always be a focal point on any page. They click that's leading them directly to a place where they can put in card information, or like I said, if they're already a member of ActBlue Express, just click and have it done. Also, they are going to have options there right away to become a reoccurring donor on our platform, which is really where the meat and potatoes lie. We always want somebody to be so inspired and so motivated that they want to continue their financial journey with us by donating every month, every other month, or even making larger donations at the end of the year, which all of those are very customizable on our platform.
Yes, we're very grateful at Disability Victory, because we use ActBlue for all of our recurring donors who got us particularly through the early times and some of the lean times over the past more than a year now.
Yep.
And I'll also say, excuse me, from the perspective of someone who uses Action Network, which is a very popular tool for sending emails in the progressive space. A lot of progressive candidates and organizations use it. It is one of the more cost-effective email programs as well. And there's ways to integrate ActBlue into your Action Network so that you can get, people's donor history. It's a lot more metrics, making sure that whenever people donate, they end up in your email system as well. So that is very helpful.
Yes, because of course, we're not a CRM, but we try very hard to make sure that we are always developing those connections with other main CRMs in the space, so that those networks are always feeding into each other and making it a lot more seamless for you to communicate with your network.
Any questions for folks? And while we leave that open for a little longer, I'm going to put, we do have an upcoming training that will be on Thursday, August 1st with Vote Run Lead Action. We're going to be talking about building accessible and disability inclusive campaigns and organizations. So I'm going to put that link in the chat and hope to see folks there. And we're going to be having other trainings sponsored by ActBlue as well. So we'll be sure to email everyone whenever those are up. Seeing any? Folks, another minute or two. I know it's been 2 hours, is quite a lengthy session for talking about fundraising. It's the longest session we've done at Disability Victory so far. So, also, if you have questions afterwards, feel free to contact us at hello@disabilityvictory.org, and we will work to answer those. So I'll give it, a minute or two longer. Oh, someone just said this has been very helpful. Thank you for putting it together. And as I mentioned earlier, we are going to take the recording and get it captioned again. And we will be putting that up on our YouTube channel in a couple of days. So we'll be sure to share that link with you. So you can come back and get all of this fundraising wisdom. Just thank you. Okay, I think with that, that we are good to end a couple minutes early. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our wonderful presenters, Kristin and Auburn. Thank you to Neil, who is our co-founder and co-director, and to our ASL interpreters and cart captioners for a wonderful presentation today. As I said, we're having another event on Thursday, August 1st about accessible and disability inclusive campaigns. We're going to be working hard to bring more training programs to you. We got to put our own fundraising knowledge to use to make that happen. So yeah, and we make sure to join the email list if you have not already. I will put that in the chat as well, so you can stay updated there and on our social media. And have a good rest of your Monday, everyone. Thank you.